There is a large disparity for Latinos when it comes to worker rights, economic, and racial justice. We discuss this some more with Dr. Patricia Campos Medina. She is an expert in this arena, and it's all here on the next Latino Motion. Join us.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on Facebook and YouTube. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics. Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare. For more information, call 1-888-569-1000 or visit atlanticare.org. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.
Welcome to Latino Motion, a weekly interview show highlighting issues impacting New Jersey's Latino community while advancing understanding of Latino cultural heritage and contributions to our society. And here is your host, Bert Lopez.
Buenos dias and welcome to Latino Motion. I'm happy to have Dr. Patricia Campos Medina to discuss a broad set of topics targeting worker rights, economic, and racial justice. And Patricia, it's so great to have you on the show. Welcome to Latino Motion.
Thank you for inviting me, Bert, to this show. And I'm so excited that it's still going and you're doing such a wonderful job educating and informing our community in South Jersey. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And I'm captivated by your background. I see you have a number of figurines back there, including El Dia de los Reyes. And, you really have the Latino thing going on there. Really love it.
Thank you. It echoes all my Latino heritage. I collecting different figures from different Latin American countries, actually from all over the world, because I have some figurines from Africa in my background. And it just keeps me rooted to what this work is all about, which is to advance the voices of workers of color, people of color, and to engage them in the process of making our democracy work here in the United States.
So before we get into the main topic we wanted to talk about, which is the worker rights, economic, and racial justice, which is very important for the Latino community, certainly wanted to get more information about you for our audience. And I know that you are currently employed with Cornell University. Tell me more about that.
Yes, I serve as the executive director of the Worker Institute at the School of Industrial and Labor Relations at Cornell University. I hold a PhD on political science, and I am a researcher, educator, and labor leader advocating for policies that advance economic rights and workers' rights for American workers. So fundamentally, the work that we do at the Labor Research Institute is to look at what's happening in the economy to workers, to low-wage workers, to immigrant workers, and figure out what are the policy solutions to advance economic opportunity for those communities. So I am excited to call myself a policy innovator and a researcher for worker rights. And at the core of what we do at Cornell is to work with labor leaders, union leaders to advance economic policy that protects the rights of workers to organize, that advances the creation of good jobs in a green economy, and that advances the protection of workers' rights for all immigrant workers and protects women to work free of sexual harassment and a LGBTQ plus community to work free of sexual harassment and gender violence in the workplace.
And I know that, it's 2024, right? That we've went through the civil rights movement. We're going through a lot of changes, but still, there's so much more work to do as far as worker rights. And what do you see are some of the main issues facing workers today?
What we have seen, and I think that we knew it before the pandemic, but since the pandemic, what we saw is that the decline in unionization in the United States. Remember, before 1990, we used to be at a unionization rate that was around 15%. In the 80s, it used to be around 30%. So our unionization rates have gone down due to our changes in trade economics and the movement from a manufacturing economy to a service economy in the United States. Because of the reduction in the power of unions, we have seen an increase on low-wage work, on jobs that are just about the minimum wage. And before we had the 5 for 15, which was a fight that workers took upon themselves to increase the minimum wage to 15, our minimum wage federally continues to be $7.25. So we have a stagnation in wages since the 1990s. We have had a decline in unionization since the 1990s. We also have had losses in the ability of workers to have paid leave, pay sick leave, and pay family leave. And aftercare and childcare has gotten more expensive for working families. So what is important, why am I telling you all that? Because the decline in unionization has a lot to do with the ability of workers to gain power through policy. So what we have been able to do in the labor movement, and I am a long-time labor activist and labor leader, is that we have continued to fought for economic policies at the state level to get to a minimum wage of $15 per hour, which is what we have in New Jersey, thank God, because of the activism of many unions in the Working Families Party. We have a 5 for 15. We have paid family leave in New Jersey. Many other states do not have it. We have 5 days of sick leave for families. But regardless of that, though, in the pandemic, what happened is that workers who didn't have unions, and even workers who live here in New Jersey, saw that they were disposable, that their lives were disposable, that while some people could stay home and be protected like I was, a lot of those workers became essential workers, and they basically got sick and many died. So since the pandemic, what we have seen is an increase in the interest of workers to unionize, and that has led to an increase 300% of unionization demands. You saw the UAW workers on strike. Right now in New Jersey, we're gonna see the Anheuser-Busch workers on strike. So there's a lot increase on the interest of workers to organize. And my job as an activist, as a leader, is to figure out how to help those workers have the right to join a union and get the benefit and the power to negotiate with corporate America. So that's what's happening right now.
So Patricia, as far as balancing this with the needs, economic needs of business, for example, you mentioned family leave. That there was a lot of resistance with the business community about offering that type of benefit. How do we balance that and still maintain a healthy environment for business?
There shouldn't be a trade-off between the health and safety of workers and the ability of corporate America to make profits. The problem that we have is a corporate America that is making billions out of putting people's lives at risk. And before the pandemic, workers were believing the story that in order for our economy to function, workers needed to accept low wages and needed to accept insecure jobs, needed to accept low benefits, needed to accept lack of control over their work hours. What happened during the pandemic is that they did. Yet, corporate America, instead of reinvesting the money in the workers, took it out in profits, increased CEO pay, and CEO pay, it has skyrocketed. While workers' wages were stagnant. So what we see is that what we need to do is actually hold corporate America accountable for reinvesting profits back into workers' lives, in workers' wages, rather than to invest it in Wall Street. So there shouldn't be a trade-off between
I
making
agree
sure
with you
that
100%, and that's a very, very important point, right? That there needs to be a give and take here, and certainly you mentioned some of the very solid points about corporate America benefiting at the cost of the workers. We want to continue this discussion. We have a lot to cover, and certainly want to talk more about and we covered a little bit of economic justice, but also racial justice. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion.
Latino Motion with Bert Lopez is presented by Latino Motion Public Affairs Media, a New Jersey nonprofit corporation. Join us online at www.latinomotion.tv. Find us on Facebook and YouTube. We encourage your comments and contributions for show topics.
Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Dr. Patricia Campos Medina. We were talking about some very interesting subjects, Dr. Medina, and certainly the big area that you've been involved with throughout your work career has been on worker rights, economic and racial justice. We want to continue that discussion. Now, we left off talk a little bit about the economic justice, but there's so much more ground to cover in that subject alone. Tell me more about what the big factors are in terms of the economic injustice that we see today.
Yes, the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice released a study recently in which it showed that there is income and wealth gap between white families in New Jersey and Black families and Latino families. Specifically, it highlighted that the wealth for a white family in New Jersey is around $300,000 per family. For a Black family, is around $17,000. And for a Latino family, we're talking about the median. The median is about $45,000. So that is a huge wealth disparity. And wealth, and it has to do with what is your income security, whether you own property, whether you have a business, whether you have capital to invest. So what we need to figure out in New Jersey, and this is where the creation of good jobs, the creation of living wage jobs, and access to education and training is critical for Latino families, because in order to reduce the wealth gap between white families and Black and Latino families, we actually need to invest both in good jobs, living wage jobs. This is where unions and the 5 for 15 comes into place, and pay family leave and pay sick leave, ability to buy a home comes into place. But also, we have to create policies that allow small business entrepreneurs, women of color, and Latino entrepreneurs to have access to capital to invest in their businesses. So New Jersey has a lot of work to do in order to help Latino families and help Black families to access capital to invest in their business. So I encourage everyone to understand that the governor of New Jersey and the federal government both have a role to play in creating access to entrepreneurial loans, to creating access to more access to business with the government. Also, there was a report that was issued recently in which New Jersey got a very low passing grade in the disparity study, because it shows that the majority of contracts are connected to the government contracting businesses are going to white firms, and Latino firms and Black firms are getting less than 10% of business with the government. So we do have ways to reduce income and wealth inequality. We are just not using them, and we need to do more. So I always advocate for good jobs, union jobs, protections, access to retirement benefits, but we also need to advocate for our entrepreneurial Latino class to have access to capital to invest in their businesses.
And we often hear about Latino families having a larger number of family members living with them, and it's become not just a cultural thing, but it's also become a necessity, particularly for the younger Latinos who simply can't afford even an apartment because the cost of living is so high, and they're not getting the type of jobs that, like you said, that have that living wage opportunity. Now, what do you foresee or could say about the responsibility of corporate America? You mentioned some of the responsibility of government, but of the businesses to help elevate those high-paying jobs?
Well, they had to start by negotiating with the unions and agreeing to sign collective bargaining agreements for those workers who have voted for a union. We have many cases here in New Jersey. We have the Starbucks workers who have voted for a union and 2 years later don't have a union. Workers at Amazon that have voted for a union and 2 years later, Amazon refuses to organize to accept and give them a living wage contract. We have also right now Anheuser-Busch based out of Newark, who is refusing to negotiate with workers who have been there for a long time. So corporate America needs to start following the law. Labor rights is the law of the land. They need to start by enforcing it. But they also need politicians who forces corporate America to actually follow the law. We also need to reinstate the corporate tax in New Jersey. There is an ongoing effort in New Jersey to reinstate it so that corporate America pays more taxes into creating living communities where people can afford to live. Part of the affordability crisis that we have in New Jersey is that we don't have enough affordable housing. We don't have enough the creation of mixed housing. So that is a combination of federal investment, but also a combination of the state being able to have more resources to invest in the creation of affordability for New Jersey. We also need to make college and universities more affordable.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because education is certainly a big key towards leading to more higher paying jobs. And certainly there seems to be a disparity, right, in terms of Latinos and folks, people of color having those opportunities. Certainly the cost of education is the key. Tell me more about that.
Since the 2000s, students have had to take on more of the cost of higher education through loans, through private loans, to the point that students are graduating from a 4-year education with $100,000 of debt, $250,000 of debt. That's a combination of a reduction of federal assistance to Pell Grants to the children of working families, but also to the privatization of student loans. And also the lack of investment from public universities in reducing the cost of tuition, even for places like Rutgers. So all of those things we need to address all of those things. Beginning investing more in higher education so tuition is cheaper. In a federal government creating more opportunities for Pell Grant and financial aid, and making sure that student loans are only a small percentage of what working class kids need to pay. But fundamentally, what we need to do to allow a whole generation of students right now is to actually fight for student debt forgiveness. And President Biden already has a proposal on the table to forgive some of the debt. We needed to be more aggressive with that and make it faster so that a whole generation, we talked about earlier how a lot of kids are living with their parents still because they can afford to live. Part of it is that because they're carrying about $150,000 in debt and they cannot afford to go on their own. So we need to eliminate and do debt forgiveness. And President Biden has a plan, and we need elected officials to stand on the side of debt forgiveness. Just like we forgave the debt to the banks, we need to be able to forget the debt to the children of working class families.
That's a very good point. And Patricia, a lot of this needs to create a little more power within the Latino and African American communities in the political sense. And we want to talk a little bit more when we come back about civic engagement. We'll be right back with more Latino Motion. Welcome back to Latino Motion. We continue our discussion with Patricia Campos Medina, and we were talking about a whole array of worker rights, economic, and racial justice with Dr. Campos. Patricia, I know that you started to mention in the end of the last segment about the importance of having a voice to address a lot of these issues in terms of the worker rights, economic, the big economic gap that exists, as well as racial justice. So obviously, civic engagement is very important. And we do have a great deal of Latinos here in New Jersey. Tell me more about how critical, important it is for more Latinos to be engaged civically.
There's a saying that is very well known that says that if you're not on the table, you're on the menu.
That's a good one.
Yes. So what we need to do is that in order to be able to make decisions about who gets resources in New Jersey and who's making choices about how to spend the taxes that we pay into the different communities, that we actually have to be at the table because otherwise resources are not coming to our communities. And we in New Jersey have it's not just a wealth disparity, an income disparity between Black and Latinos and white families. We also have a disparity on political representation. Latinos are 21% of the population, and we only have less than 8% of political representation at the state level. So we have,
and that's a very low participation rate. And I know that you have also been focusing on a lot of those activities around getting more people to run for office. You run the Latina Civic Action organization as well. And you're also the producer of Activista Rise Up, all of which is really raising the bar here in terms of getting more Latinos engaged. Tell me more about that.
I think it's important for Latinos to understand what is impacting decisions and issues that they care about, and then that they engage. That's the purpose of Activista Rise Up. Talking about issues like the lack of affordable housing, what's causing it, how can we make sure that HUD invests more money into affordable housing vouchers so more of our families can actually have the ability to live close to where they work. That is overall, that is a political issue, because if we are not engaged in the politics of how public housing gets allotted, gets built, and gets funded, then we don't create more opportunities for affordable housing for our community. So at Activista Rise Up, we try to educate the public about the issues that are impacting Latinos in the community. At Latina Civic Action and Latina Civic PAC and Foundation, what we try to do is to actually train Latina women to understand the policymaking process, understand the politics, and then run for office, with the goal that we are going to build the bench. We have a program called Latinas Building the Bench, so more Latinas actually engage in the process of policy making. And our goal is to get more Latinas involved, because when you engage a Latina in politics, you actually engage the entire family. So the goal is to increase our political activity so that we actually have a voice in the decisions that get made. We as Latinos don't, we are very engaged in our churches, in our communities, but we had this disregard for politics and voting. And we need to change that. The Black community, which is about 15% of the population, has about equal political representation, because they have a history of civil rights activity and of engagement in their churches for around politics. So my aspiration is always to be at equal representation in politics. So if we are 20% of the population, we should have 20% of political representation, both at the state level and at the local level, so that we are the one making choices about how is the money spent, where do we invest it, are we taking care of our schools, are we providing affordable health care, are we providing affordable child care, after school care. Those are all decisions that can made by politicians, and we are not the ones making them. Those resources don't come to our community. So I encourage all Latinos, puertorriqueños que tienen el derecho a votar, Puerto Ricans who have the right to vote, please engage in your local city council races, in your local school board races, and just vote. so that we can change the dynamics of who's controlling power for our communities.
And Patricia, I know that you mentioned, spending money on the schools, et cetera. And that's local politics, right? Getting involved locally is very important. What advice do you give to individuals? How should they get started? I mean, there are so many opportunities maybe they don't know about. Tell me more about that.
Well, you should join your local civic association. I know that we have an organization for Hispanics that you had led for a long time in South Jersey. So join your local organization that is advancing Latino causes. Go to our website, latinacivicaction.com, and sign up for our updates so that you can show up to our public events. Also, just show up to your school board meetings. They usually held at night around 7 o'clock. You can give dinner and then go. Some school board meetings are held by Zoom now to make it more accessible. Just pay attention to what they're deciding. Some decisions are very important for like how you're gonna build a new roof, if you're gonna change how we're gonna pay for air conditioning in schools, in the school rooms, what kind of food you're providing to kids. Those are all important decisions that get made there. And so just show up and engage. And if you don't know how to get started, please reach out at Latina Civic Action, and we will connect you with a local organization that you can engage with and participate.
So, Patricia, what's the biggest obstacle that many Latinos have, both on making sure that they do vote, that they do get civically engaged? What do you see as the biggest drawback, the hesitation to do so?
I think we live busy lives here in the United States. We worry about working. We worry about making sure our kids are safe. We worry about, some people have 2-3 jobs and they feel like they cannot make time for politics. What I have to say to people who are busy is just take the time and invest in getting engaged in your local community. Find 1 hour a month to do that, and you will see how much more you understand the local issues. The other thing is that, for a long time, there wasn't bilingual communication on meetings for local school board meetings or for decisions made by government. But now we do have a legislation at the state level that mandates that all communications on formal decisions of public bodies have to be translated in different languages. So I think language barrier is a problem for some communities, but I think we have made the extra effort to make information accessible. But also, sometimes the hours of school board meetings are a problem if you don't have childcare, but you can bring your kids. When I had my kids were young, I used to drag them to school meetings, and they also learn a valuable lesson, which is to get engaged in public office. So I would just say, seek community, seek information, and make civic engagement part of your daily life. And you will see that it adds value to your connection in your local community.
Well, Patricia, this has been great. Obviously, we could talk for hours. You have such a wealth of information. Certainly, we would love to have you back in the future. So thanks for joining us. And thanks for joining us once again at home here in Latino Motion.
Funding for Latino Motion is provided by Atlanticare. For more information, call 1-888-569-1000 or visit atlanticare.org. Atlantic City Electric, energy for a changing world. And South Jersey Gas.